Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's great to have this opportunity to meet this group of people, and thank you for doing such a good job of introducing me. I don't think there's much more that I need to add. Maybe I'll say I'm a Maritimer at heart. I'm from the East Coast, but grew up a lot of the time in Toronto, and having lived in Calgary for about close to 14 years with a few trips in and out to Edmonton, I guess I'm a Westerner too now. So. Just a little bit personally, I'm married. I've been married for about a dozen years now. I have a 9-year-old daughter, Simone, who's actually back there tonight, and a 6-year-old son, Luke, who's at home in Calgary with his dad for the evening. So tonight you asked me to focus on a few specific areas, and I'll try to do that. The importance of developing connections with people, or I say the dreaded word to many women, networking. How I've discovered and used my own strengths to become the person that I am. And you've asked me to describe how I see a valuable female scientist or engineer. So I'm going to do my best to cover off on all those things. And as I do that, what I'd like to do is share some of my personal experiences and career tips as I go along. I've kind of developed my own career tips anyhow, and hopefully they'll be relevant for you. So like we said in the introduction, I graduated from Queen's in 1991 and went straight through to law school. Just felt that at that time we were in a pretty big recession, and I would say as a female engineer with pretty good grades, you could get a job, but it was also kind of the time if you were going to stay in school to keep doing that. So I did that. And I mean, I really enjoyed engineering, but I felt that I could somehow try and combine the two degrees. And law school was interesting, actually. I didn't like law school at all. I didn't enjoy it. I'm not sure. It was a very different environment from engineering, I guess. But then actually I went out to practice law, and I was really fortunate. I loved it. I wound up working for a very senior lawyer who, he was also an engineer, and he really took me under his wing, and you'll hear themes of mentoring and that sort of thing. He really took me under his wing. And he was a great, what we call litigator. So we did a lot of all the courtroom stuff. So I managed to combine the two degrees by doing defense work for architects and engineers when they were sued for malpractice, I guess you'd call it. I also litigated construction claims. I had worked for Shell, actually, in my summers doing a lot of construction projects, and so that was a particular area of interest for me. And in fact, I was on one of the largest construction claims we had. That was out in Halifax and out in Nova Scotia on the construction of a power plant, and I wound up traveling to, I was telling someone tonight, I spent my time in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Chicago, and Tokyo. I mean, all out of Halifax. It seemed pretty cool to be doing that in your 20s, in your late 20s, but it was also pretty challenging. I wasn't married, but I had friends, and I wanted to continue to develop those friendships and that sort of thing. And at that time, although when I graduated from law school, we were the first year at the University of New Brunswick that was more than 50% women. The law firms were still being run by mainly men, white men that were north of 50, and they had a particular culture, I guess, that they expected. And I'm a pretty hard worker, so I was up for the hard work, and the travel and that sort of thing. But towards the end of one year, one of the partners came to me and he said, so-and-so, he's an engineer and a lawyer too, and he did all this traveling on the big lawsuit over the Husky Bow Valley when that rig. We had that rig accident, and he said he got a really big bonus at the end of the year for all the traveling he had done. But he had a family, so the bonus was for being away from his family. You don't have a family, so I guess you won't get a bonus. And I stopped and I thought, you know what? If I keep doing this, I never will have a family. And that was something that was really important to me. So that's when I decided, and it was a big decision, I decided to leave this law firm. I was clearly on the partnership track, doing well, and I went to work for Shell. So I joined Shell as what they call it, in-house counsel, and wanted to see what that would be like. And it was pretty good. I mean, I knew what the company culture was like pretty well from having worked for them as an engineering student and that sort of thing. And I went off to work on what was called, actually back then it was called Lease 13. We didn't even know what it was, but it became the Athabasca Oil Sands Project. And back then, I took this job with an agreement that if the project didn't get approved, I could be terminated on 3 months' notice. That was a big decision to make, to move to Calgary and do all that stuff. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go for it, and we're going to see what's going to happen. Well, a year into that, they actually still hadn't approved the project, but things were going reasonably well for me, and they asked me to move into a project engineering role. And I always say that, so I had been negotiating all these contracts, and I say that's the best way to get back as a lawyer, is make them live with the contract that they wrote. But really, it was a great opportunity that I remember the night that they asked me to do this, just not even sleeping that night, thinking, oh my God, do I want to do this? This is so different to go back. But I knew that I really did have that passion for engineering, and I felt I was getting further away from it. So I went down and spent 3 years working in Fleur Daniel's offices, overseeing about $500 million worth of work. And I mean, it was hardcore engineering. It was design, it was reviewing. I mean, I went in there, I didn't even understand. I knew what a P&ID stood for, but that was about it. It was a piping and instrumentation diagram, but I didn't know how, and we were right in the middle of reviewing all these sort of things, and a steep learning curve, but I mean, it was just a fantastic opportunity. And in that time, I also managed to meet my husband. Simone was born just as we went into commissioning and startup of that project. I mean, lots of stuff going on. And since then, I never actually have gone back into our legal department. I've worked in our refining business. I've had opportunities to work in our retail business. I've gone back into projects. It's probably where my passion lies. I was the construction manager for what, from 2008 to 2010, was the largest construction project in Canada. We had over 10,000 tradespeople outside of Edmonton, and now I'm the general manager for contracting and procurement. So that has a specific focus on our heavy oil business, but I am I guess the senior representative for that area in Canada. And with the oil sands, we talk about heavy oil, it's the oil sands, but it's also our in situ operations. And in situ, for those who aren't familiar with that term, is the stuff that's too deep down to mine. And in fact, that's probably 80% of the reserves. You hear that we have the second largest, or some would say the third largest reserves in the world with the oil sands, and it's the in situ is probably 80% of it. So some really interesting things there. And I have to say that having been in that role for about a year and a half now, it's just been a fabulous opportunity to build on those strengths and really see a lot of things start to come together. And, you know, been working for Shell, it's probably 12 years when I came into the role, and start to feel really comfortable about what I can do, but still really stretching as well. And it's a challenging part of the business to be in. I mean, it's not the most popular area to tell people that you work in the oil sands. So you really want to be in a position where you can influence things for better, but also where you can be an advocate for it as well. Through those, well, I graduated in 1994, so through those almost 20 years now since I graduated, some really great career opportunities, but I have to say some real low lights as well. And I think you learn more from those, or at least I have, than maybe from some of the highlights as you're going along. So through that, let me get into my career tips. The first one is very much know what you want and know what's going to make you happy. I really, truly believe that, because I think that if you know what you want and what's going to make you happy, it makes making decisions a lot easier, because you always go back to your core values. You go back to what's important to you. So back in, I think it was 2005 in Shell, you know, there's no debating. Royal Dutch Shell is a Western European male-dominated company. I mean, don't debate that. But we're trying to change that, because we do really see the value of diversity within the company. And one of the things that we've done is try and figure out how can we get, say, more visible minorities, how can we get more women through into senior positions, what can we do to enable that to happen? Because until we really kind of get that critical mass, you're not going to get change, right? You need to get that going right up to the top. So we did this study on you know, why women were facing these barriers and that sort of thing. And one of the things that's come out of it is something we call the Women's Career Development Program, and I'm one of the facilitators for that program for the US and for Canada. And in that, we actually talk a lot about knowing yourself, self-awareness, and it's one of the big things that I push as we go along. And as I said, whatever is important to you, it doesn't actually matter what that is. It's knowing what's important to you. So it could be money, it could be your relationships, it could be having something that's high profile in politics, it could be family, whatever it is. It could be any combination of those things. It's knowing what's important to you. Because otherwise, we're faced with these decisions all the time. And, you know, I think one of the things that women face is, we talk about type A personalities, and I'm sure there's a lot in this room, and God knows I work with a lot. But I often think of the type E woman, and I don't know if any of you have heard that term, but it's everything to everybody. We're always struggling to meet all these expectations, to do the right thing, to help folks and that sort of thing. And we really struggle sometimes to prioritize ourselves and what our core values are. You know, this past fall, working for a large company can be great at times. Some people, it's not for them. I really love the opportunities that it gives me. And last fall, I was asked to look at to lead a team in The Hague looking at this potential for a double-dip global recession. I mean, I'm a project engineer. Oh my God, what do I know about this? But this is a great opportunity. I mean, it was high exposure to, it was the CFO that was sponsoring this and one of the managing directors of the company. They wanted to know, really great stretch. I mean, totally interesting area. So they said, we want you to come for 4 to 6 weeks to The Hague. And, they said, we know you have a family, so how about you come for 2 weeks, go home for 2 weeks, come for 2 weeks, go home for 2 weeks. I'm going, no, I'm not doing that. That's not going to happen. But I didn't want to turn down that opportunity. So instead, because I can't stand being away over a weekend, it really bothers me, and I'll fly back from Europe to not be away over a weekend. But instead, what we did is we actually all went to The Hague. So my daughter, my son, my husband, we packed up. We lived in an apartment that is about a third of the size of this room for a month. And, we've set up our lives to be able to do that. We've had a lot of discussions at the family table. The kids are getting more included in those discussions as they get older that allow us to do that. We recognize the opportunities, but the constraints of the type of career that I have. So we very intentionally, my husband is self-employed. He works with internet startup companies. All his partners are in California. That's very intentionally given us some flexibility. And those have been hard decisions to make along the way, and ones that we've spent a lot of time on. But when things like this come up, I mean, right now where he's at, he needs Skype and he can be effective a lot of places. So we just felt that being together, the opportunity for the kids to live in The Hague for a month, I would say I not only did my own brain grow during that month, I could literally see the kids' brains expanding. I mean, it was just a really neat opportunity. But this is, as I said, has come with a lot of soul searching. When Simone was about 6 and Luke was 3, I was traveling a ton working for Shell. I was all over the place. I was in what they call a global role, and I was gone all the time. And I finally, about a year into it, I put up my hand and I said, I can't do this anymore. This is not the right thing for us. I can't do that. And it helped us to crystallize that we wouldn't do something like that again. We would go places, but we would go together. And that was hard. That was really, I'm not used to saying I can't do something. I couldn't think of a time I'd done it before, but it was a big decision. So like I said, whatever that is that makes you happy, figure out what that is, what you want, what your ultimate goals are, what kind of strikes you in the core, because it makes making those decisions a lot easier. In this program that I was talking about, as I said, we've spent so much time on it. It's actually one of the biggest breakthroughs we have with women is kind of, oh, this is what I want. And what I say is, we'll give you tools for what it's like to work for a company like Shell to try and help you succeed, get through this kind of male-dominated environment. But what we really want to focus on is, who are you? What drives you? What makes you happy? Because, if you come out at the end of the day and go, it's not a career with Shell, cool, great. I mean, at least you figured yourself out and you know what's going to work for you, right? And that's success for me. So anyhow, that's my first career tip, and probably one of the most fundamental ones for me. The next one that I think we all need to develop if you want success is to really go for things and take risks. Balanced risk, but go for it. You can tell by my career that that's obviously been my motto as I've gone along. Okay, well, I'll move to Calgary without really any commitment to a job. Okay, I'll try being an engineer and that sort of thing. But you know what? They're great opportunities, and those are the things, when you have them, that really stretch you. And you talk about how you learn about your strengths. That's how you learn about your strengths, is by really stretching yourself, by getting out of your comfort zone. When I was about 8 weeks pregnant with our son, I was offered this big promotion, but there was a huge amount of spend that the company wanted to do and all this sort of stuff. And it was this great opportunity to move into our retail business. I mean, aside from buying gas at our gas stations, I knew very little about our retail business. And James and I sat and looked at James is my husband's name. Sorry. We looked at it and we said, what are we going to do here? 8 weeks pregnant, second child. How are we going to do this? And again, this goes back to knowing what you want. We had this conversation before, so it made the decision easier. And for us, having somebody at home, especially that first year, we felt you can have 2 working parents, but having somebody at home that first year was really important. So it was actually James, through no small sacrifice on his part, that stayed home for a year with our son, in that case, to let me go back and do that. But in any case, so my career tip is actually around going for it, and I'm fitting in the knowing what you want. But so there I was, 8 weeks pregnant, take on this big job. But as I said, a similar sort of thing happened when I was pregnant with Simone. Shell always knew that I was pregnant before our family seemed to know I was pregnant. But anyhow, transparency, I guess, is another thing to tell people what's going on. But anyhow, a couple of years later, I had feedback from my boss. He said, you have no idea how kind of overwhelming and intimidating you are, do you? And I was like, oh my God. And, I've got a strong personality. I come from a construction background. I mean, let's just say the level of assertiveness you need in a construction environment is different than when you come back into head office. And I've always had to kind of manage the reentry and try to be pretty aware of that. So at first I thought, oh my God, I'm not being inclusive of people, or I'm intimidating people. I don't want to do that. And he said, no, that's actually not what I meant. He said, what I meant is you arrive, you come into this totally new part of the business, you've got this big agenda for change, you're pregnant, you decide our strategy, you have this kid, you come back to work almost right away, you decide our strategy is flawed, you're going to fix this, you're going to fix that. Every once in a while we walk past your office and something went blip with your childcare and you've got a kid sitting on your lap, and we're all going, who the hell is this? What is she doing, right? And I'll never forget, because for me what that crystallized, I never saw that as a strength. And it helped me realize that was actually a strength that I had. Like, I thought everybody just kind of, oh, why wouldn't you try this? This is interesting. For me, I was doing things that I just thought were interesting. They were challenges, and maybe I could have been a little more thoughtful about the consequences of those things. But it was something that, it was the way he said it that I finally went, okay, I guess that is a strength of mine. And that really leads into my third career tip, and that's around getting feedback. But before I finish let me go back to the going for it. One more piece of information that I'd like to share with you, because this one has always hit me. So we've done all these studies and looked at all these external studies on women and barriers. So when applying for a new job, as a general rule, men will apply for a new job when they think they have about 40 to 50% of the skills to do the job. Women will apply if they feel they have 80% or more of the skills to do the job. If you're doing that, if you can already do 80% of the job, what's the stretch for you? What are you going to learn by going into that job for 4 or 5 years, right? So I've had to remind myself of that one. So when I say go for it and stretch yourself, I mean, what we often as women might feel is stretching ourselves might not actually be stretching ourselves that much. So really go and think of where you can challenge yourself. So like I said, my third career tip was around getting feedback. In that case, this was a strength that I didn't realize I had that finally crystallized. And maybe people had said something to me before, but it was the way this guy said it that I kind of went, okay. But you need to have we talk about self-awareness, you need to have a good understanding of your strengths, your weaknesses, and you can get that from a lot of places. I mean, you can get it from a good boss who kind of is thinking of himself as a coach or herself as a coach and really getting to know you. You can get that from peers. You can get it. I often have gotten it from people who work for me. If I have someone who I feel is comfortable enough and has that sort of personal strength that they're going to be okay with telling me, Michelle, you kind of totally missed it on that one with the team or whatever. I try and encourage that. At least find one person who feels they can do that in confidence with me, because you don't know otherwise. I mean, you think you know, but you don't always. So trying to find folks, or sometimes if I'm working on something and I'm trying to be more effective with maybe how I deliver something in a meeting, or maybe there's somebody that really I'm struggling with in a meeting, and every friggin' time I'm in with that person in the meeting, I feel like I'm losing, not being as effective as I could. I'll find someone who I trust and say, can you watch how I handle myself and give me feedback afterwards if I did that well or didn't do that well? And it's a hard thing to take. We always want to do really well, but it's so important, because if you don't get that, you can't correct it. And sometimes those things are just small things you're doing that are just having totally unintended consequences. So now I've talked about taking that stretch and going for stuff, but with that comes risks. And you can manage that risk through the relationships you develop. And that's my fourth career tip, is don't do it alone. We've talked already in some of the introductory notes. Find mentors, find peers, find sounding boards, find somebody who'll be a coach. We're all very capable and competent people, and we think that we can take care of everything ourselves, but it takes a lot of energy to do that. And believe it or not, there's people out there who have done some of those things before. So go find them and spend some time with them and learn from them. That's a really key thing as well. And sometimes they can just be a bit of a cheerleading committee. My current boss said to me the other day, we were talking about future roles, and I was like, oh, well, I don't know about this. And he said, Michele, and he's not actually the most intuitive guy. He pretty squarely falls in that male American style. But you know, every once in a while he has these moments, and he just said to me, you know, Michele, you need to remember that you're in the driver's seat here. This is totally up to you, and you've got lots of opportunities. Just remember that. And then he said to me, I know you know that already. And I said, you know what, I don't, and I really needed to be reminded, and thank you for that. And it's finding those opportunities to open up and let people help you and support you as you do things. And I'll get into my last career tip, and that's the power of connections. So I'm avoiding the use of the word networking, but actually I have to say I'm one of those people who really has struggled with understanding what the value of networking is. I definitely fell into the trap that many women do of thinking somehow it was slimy or manipulative to go out and be strategic about who you make connections with to help further your career. But I also started to see a lot of guys doing it and it working really well for them. And I thought, okay, who's the dumb one here? So it's working for them. And you know what? I also think that as I've maybe gotten more senior in the company and just that much busier in that broader a stretch of people that I have to connect with or know, I mean, I'm always looking for good people to come and work in my organization, or I'm happy to have them work in one of my colleagues' organization if it's the right fit. I need some help getting to know those people. So if people network with me, if people connect with me, you're making my life easier is the way I see it. And it's funny because I've gotten better about certainly listening to folks with what they want. If I have people on my team that I'm trying to help them get another role, I'll network like crazy for them. I'll be honest, I still struggle to network for myself. It still feels uncomfortable, but it's one of those things that one has to do and understand that it's becoming more and more common. I've noticed with this women's career development program, the younger women who are coming through, they look at the older ones like myself and go, well, what's your problem? Of course you have to network. We know that. So there's some of them are smarter than we were. But you know, I'll go through, again, these studies I've found are really interesting. And one of them looked at the three components, expertise, impact, and exposure. So you think of your expertise, your impact, and your exposure. Which of those things is the most important to get promoted? And this isn't just a within Shell thing, this is a broader study. Expertise, impact, or exposure. Well, I can tell you that expertise weighs about 10% in getting promoted. And the reason being is, for me, certainly where a lot of you are going to go, it's table stakes. You're going to go workplaces with people at least as smart as you. They know what they're doing, they're capable, they're competent. Expertise, we weed out the folks who don't have that expertise beforehand. So expertise, while very important in the business world, is really expected. You know, I haven't worked for enough other companies to be able to say so, but at Shell, you're expected to be smart, you're expected to be good at your job, you're expected to know what you do. And certainly if you don't, well, obviously it cuts out your opportunities, but it's not what promotes you to the next level. The other one that we look at is impact. So that's about who you are, how you carry yourself, the impact you have on people. That one is about 30%. So it's important. You need to make sure that you're getting your, I call it, now the word is personal brand. You develop that you get that impact, that you carry yourself, you get feedback about how you're impacting people. Exposure is 60%, they've found, in terms of getting promoted. And the reason being is, like I said, expertise is table stakes. You have to have that already. You have to make a positive impact. But if people don't know who you are, if they don't know you exist, if you don't know the job exists, it's pretty hard to get promoted. So you really need to get that exposure to understand. You need to get that exposure to understand that, wow, I never thought of working in that department. I never realized there was a connection to what I do. I didn't even know what you guys did. I mean, the number of young people who have sat in my office and said, I didn't know you did that in contracting and procurement. That's interesting. Yeah, it is. Come on in. Right? But if you don't know those things exist, and you get that through networking. And I'll also give you another example, because it happened just a few weeks ago. I was at the Queen. I went to Queen's, and they have this oil and gas speaker series in January. That's one of my favorite things to go to. And my absolute favorite thing is the dinner on the Saturday night. 2 years ago, I sat with a group of young women. They just peppered me all night with questions, and it was a ton of fun. And then this past year, I sat with a group of international students, somewhere from Nigeria and somewhere from China. And this one young man, he said, you know, I'm in engineering, and he was really kind of an interesting guy the whole night, and he said, you know, I'm in engineering chemistry, and now we can do these 12-month internships, and I'm trying to get working for Shell, but they don't seem to understand what engineering chemistry is versus chemical engineering. They don't seem to understand what, you know, this concept of a 12-month internship. I said, send me your resume. I sent it in to our recruiting folks. They came back and said, what's engineering chemistry? What's this 12-month thing? And I explained it to them, and we made him an offer last week, and he accepted. So, smart young guy, right? I want to see more women doing that with me. I want to see more women when I go to these things saying, hey, can you look at this? What do you think, right? And I'm not going to do that for everybody. I'm not going to send everybody's resume in, but like I said, in this case, he was an intelligent, articulate young person who took the time to do that. Well, okay, I can help you with that. I mean, his interview stood for itself, his marks stood for themselves, everything else. So just help make that connection and make that explanation, and all of a sudden it opened the door, right? So networking is not about bragging. It's about just being very deliberate with your connections, and there's lots of ways to do that. Now, it's not about going to a wine and cheese after work or after your classes necessarily. It can be, you know, if you look at LinkedIn, if you look at any types of social media, blogging, there's all those sort of things. But make sure that you're looking at the branches of your network, and you're not just limiting it to people who you think you can be friends with. Men are pretty good with friendliness. Think about that and whether you can extend your branches with people you know. So I just want to finish up by spending some time on what, at least in my view, makes a valuable engineer or scientist. And I think what actually you're all doing right now, by coming of your own accord to something like this to develop yourself, is exactly what our future generations need. You know, I have absolute faith in the people I meet at sessions like this, or that the young women that I met when I go to Queen's, in their ability to be really innovative, passionate, groundbreaking engineers and scientists. It's taking that time to stretch and develop yourself. When I finished engineering, I didn't get it. Like, I just thought, if I go and just be a really good engineer and work hard, that's what I can do for women in engineering. And don't get me wrong, that's a good thing to do. I mean, that helps. It's better than going and being a bad engineer, obviously. But I'd like to say I've matured since then. You know, I've actually become very passionate about, I like the word activism actually, because I think within Shell, and hopefully outside of Shell, I'm an activist about this. I'm very passionate about the ability that I have now and have had through my career to really influence the experience of young women in the workplace. You know, I mentor a lot of young women. I mentor a lot of young men as well. I talked about that program that I'm involved with, and opportunities to speak at events like this are great. And I think the most important thing that I try and do is to lead by example and to test the paradigms, to go back and say, no, I'm not going back and forth every 2 weeks. I'm taking my family with me. Got a problem with that? No? Okay, good. There we go. You know, and I say, especially since my daughter was born, since Simone was born, and she likes to say that she wants to be a scientist when she grows up. I want her to be an engineer, but she wants to be a scientist, so we'll see how that goes. But what I've realized with her, I have 3 other nieces, that everything I need to do, and that I'm in a position to do, to really make sure that things are better for her than they were for me. There's a lot of women who came before I did, who I think the mentors in this room, certainly myself, we stand on the shoulders of those women and what they did to make life better for us. I'm working hard and I know that the mentors in this room, just by volunteering their time, are doing the same thing to make things better for you guys. And I expect you to go out and do things to make things better so that Simone can stand on your shoulders. All right? Thank you.